Hi, my name is Tom and I'm an alcoholic. In November 2020, I was asked to lead an Alcoholics Anonymous men's step discussion meeting. The format of the meeting is for the leader to share their experience with one step in depth per week using the 12 and 12 book as a guide. I recorded my portion of the meeting to share with sponsees and others who could not attend the meeting. Thanks for taking the time to listen, and I hope that my message of recovery resonates with you. Hey everyone, I'm Tom. I'm an alcoholic. Thanks, Pete, for hosting the meeting. Thanks everyone for being here tonight on Step 8. I'll do a quick intro first. I'm an alcoholic. I'm an alcoholic and an addict and a codependent and an Al-Anon and anything to get me out of me. So I've picked up on a few of those addiction compulsions, isms over the years, and been to quite a few different 12-step programs and to get some relief from them. I've been sober for over 31 years, and it's a result of the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous and the fellowship and a relationship with a higher power that I've found recovery. And AA is home for me today. It provides the bedrock for my sobriety and all the tools I need to recover from all of those isms. As I've gone through the steps multiple times, I've found that, especially in the 12 and 12, which has been the kind of the subject of our study here, that there's more to this than just the substance. It's about the behavior, it's about the emotions, it's about the spiritual nature underneath of all that I react to that both causes my problems and where I could find my solution. So for step 8, the synopsis at the beginning of the book: made a list of all persons we had harmed and became willing to make amends to them all. This and the next 2 steps are concerned with personal relations. Learning to live with others is a fascinating adventure. Obstacles: reluctance to forgive, non-admission of wrongs to others, purposeful forgiving, necessity of exhaustive survey of past, deepening insight results from thoroughness, kinds of harm done to others, avoiding extreme judgments, taking the objective view. Step 8 is the beginning of the end of isolation. So as I start each of these, I want to look at why. Why step 8? Why would I want to make a list of all persons I had harmed? I would rather write a list of all people who had harmed me, which is kind of what was step 4 was. But why would I want to take an inventory of myself? And certainly, why would I be willing to make amends to them all? And again, I'm driven here as a result of my alcoholism and the momentum I've gained from doing the other steps. I've just learned through my inventory work and my character defect review that I've got these behaviors which put me in conflict with other people. And as the beginning synopsis item talked about, this step is concerned with personal relations. And I kind of mentioned that at step 1 is step 1 only first is the only one that talks about alcohol. All the rest are about relationships, relationship with myself, with other people, and with my higher power. And also, I'll throw in this time around the truth. It's my relationship with the truth that drives how thorough I am on step 8. So the discomfort I live with, because I'm now acutely aware of all my resentments and my conflicts with other people. I don't have alcohol or other substances to hide from my character defects or bury these emotions I'm feeling. I have no relief from this. I'm driven forward by searching relief, and I've been told, and I believe it to be so, that the amends process 8 and 9 is key to long-term sobriety. That more people have relapsed as a result of avoiding this step or not being thorough with this step than in other spots in the program. So, that risk is the relapse point. And there's another risk here, and this book is the Little Red Book. I don't know if anybody's ever seen it. It's a reprinting of a book from the 1940s. And it's like the 12 and 12. It was like studies on the steps. But there was a line in here which I just loved. It says that it is a proven way of life. AA is a proven way of life by which alcoholics correct their past mistakes and make restitution to relative, friend, or enemy as he affects his own recovery from the physical and mental damage alcohol has inflicted upon him. Many alcoholics have agreed to the effectiveness of our philosophy, but have failed to benefit from it because they take it too lightly, the seriousness of their physical and mental damage, and do not wish to inconvenience themselves with the provisions of our program. They find it difficult to understand that they are spiritual invalids. And that's the line I was looking for. Spiritual invalids. Like, that explains who I am, what I'm suffering from. And again, that's the risk that I don't take this seriously enough, and that I'm going to continue to live in this spiritual depression, right? This lack of spiritual connection, lack of being connected with other people, being fearful of relationships, and that's going to cause me to relapse over time. So the promises of Step 8 on page 77, it talks about we may develop the best possible relations with every human being we know. The best possible relations. Like, this gives me the opportunity to now be clean or clear with my relationships with other people. We learn how to live effectively in the world with other people without having to carry forward any of these resentments or harms, and have natural relations with other people. The other thing it talks about, this is I think the end of the chapter, it says, is the beginning of the end of isolation from ourselves and from God. Sorry, from our fellows and from God. I throw in ourselves too, again, because these are all blockers to my relationship with understanding, my true self, and stop believing the lies that I've been telling myself and my disease have been telling myself about how bad I am and damaged I am and how undeserving I am. If I go about this process, I am repairing these relationships, and I start to believe in a clearer sense of who I am. Again, we talked about throughout the steps, humility, clear, honest understanding, a perspective on myself. And I get that by clearing away this wreckage and this damage. So, it asks us to make a list. Now, it could be, it'd be easy to make this into a secretarial task, an administrative task. Well, I'm just going to write a list. It's very cut and dry. Let me get out an Excel spreadsheet, or, something along those lines, or, and just make a list of people I've harmed. I've got this list partially to begin with. I've got it in the fourth step, and a lot of the people who I have resentments towards, I've also harmed, right? And I also have my harms list, so those I could just kind of carry over. But then it's the people that I'm uncomfortable with, right? That I don't want to run into, right? If I owe somebody amends and I'm not willing to look at that, it's the people I avoid around town, right? Kind of turn my head as I'm walking down the street, go down the other aisle in the supermarket. Or maybe it's at the dinner table. Maybe it's I can't stand sitting with that person, at a holiday because I still owe them an amends. And because I'm sober now, and that spark inside me is starting to grow and nurture and become a little bit more predominant in my thinking and my emotions. Maybe it's my conscience growing and it's talking in the back of my ear. Maybe you should go talk to that guy and straighten this thing out. So that list I'm carrying around with me anyway. I know the list. This is just asking me to put it down on paper. And what my blockers are, and in this chapter, and also back in the chapter in the big book, he talks quite a bit about the blockers to making the list and the blockers to making amends. But, I have to put the people on the list regardless of the harms they caused me. So if I go back to even like the fourth step in the big book on page 67, putting out of our minds the wrongs others have done, we resolutely look for our own mistakes. So, as much as humans, we, especially alcoholics, I like to tie in tit for tat, and I wouldn't have done this if you had done that. We're constantly being asked, set that aside. Just look at this in a vacuum. Don't write your 8th step list thinking about your 9th step amends. This is just about the names. Get this down on paper so you have a starting point. In the chapter on page 79, it's got a great line here. It talks about 79. Here we go. These were some of the ways in which fear conspired with pride to hinder our making of a list of all people we had harmed. Right? So we let a mixture of the fear and our pride to prevent us from adding these people to our list. We want to minimize or get forgetful. What's it called? Purposeful forgetting. This attitude which only can be changed by deep, honest search of our motives and actions. I've had both my own amends list, and I've had an amends list of sponsees that have helped work through this, that were on the I am never going to make amends to this person. Why should I put this on the list? And the answer is because they deserve to be on the list. That I have a responsibility to myself, to my own recovery, to my higher power, who I've agreed to follow this process through, to put the names down on the list, regardless of the harms they have caused me. It doesn't mean I'm going to make an amends to them. Doesn't mean I'm going to make amends to them tomorrow. Doesn't mean I'm going to make amends to them ever, right? Although that has its own risks and damage it could cause. But for now, it's about putting the names on the list. If I had to organize them, that comes in 9, where I can go, okay, these are now, these are later, these are never. But it's about putting the name on the list. The willingness part of it is a whole other question about how do I become willing to make amends, and that I'll talk about a little bit. But in the chapter, he talks about defining the types of harms, right? So it's very easy for me to minimize, justify, rationalize something that I had done that might not raise to the level of harm, right? So again, in the big book, he goes into detail about the amends process. In the 12 and 12, he talks about where again on 80, that term instincts in collision. Where is it? Yep. We call it the result of instincts in collision, which cause physical, mental, emotional, or spiritual damage to people. So there, he's just calling it out. Have I caused that type of damage to people? Maybe it was emotional security. Maybe I stole their peace of mind, right? So, for example, my parents not knowing where I was, even though I can, explain away or, put it back on them, they were concerned about me. So I stole their peace of mind. That's a harm. Was my sex conduct selfish? And in a way, I wish Bill never wrote this list on bottom of 80 and top of 81, because he gives me too many examples to consider, right? It's like, oh, great. Now I have to think about being critically and impatient and humorless. Let me tell you about the time when I was, in my life before I had done this work, sober, where I was so wound up tight and caught in self that I had lost my sense of humor. And my wife actually said that, you're humorless. You're insufferable. Hey, that was causing a problem. I had caused harm in our relationship. He goes on with some great examples of did we try to dominate our whole family by the iron rule, or minute directions of just how their lives should be lived? Talks. That reminds me of him talking about being the director and managing and controlling everything. He talks about when we wallow in depression, self-pity oozing from every pore. Daily living with us as practicing alcoholics, and even non-practicing alcoholics, even sober, suffering alcoholics, we could be difficult, unbearable. So he basically lays these out. He's like, just don't think you're gonna kind of walk away with some major harms here in this list and pass it off as thorough. I've got to be thorough in my list and in the behaviors because I'm trying to shed myself of them so I could live peacefully and comfortably with these people the rest of my life so I don't have to go back to drinking. But it's interesting the way he forms those couple paragraphs is he talks about behavior, and then he says, now that we've looked at the behavior, who have we harmed by it, right? That's at the bottom of 81, which I think was great. Like, because in the first time through this, I thought about, well, here's the people in my life, right? And I just kind of list my relationships, in concentric circles from nuclear family and siblings and out, which is fine. But in here, he's asking us to look, again, at the subtler harms we had done, and and go through a little bit more at the again, coming off of 6 and 7 when I'm looking at character defects. How have I acted in my life? Who have I damaged as a result of them? So again, and at the top of 82, one of my favorite words he uses, fancied. Forgiving the wrongs done us, real or fancied. Again, or even even if I think that there's someone who doesn't deserve any of my time or any of my attention in terms of an amends, even if I think it's a harm that others have told me wasn't really a harm, just get it down on paper. That's what sponsorship is for. That's what your support network are, your sober brothers, to help you take a look at this stuff and to weed out the true from the false. What I love about this also is, and again, this goes back to the beginning of the chapter, he talks about this being a skill, right? I found it. Here we go. This is a very large order. Is a task which we may perform with increasing skill, but never really finish. And it talks about that honesty, the ability to build the relationships. So while in theory I could do a list, my first list, I come in, get sober, work the steps. I could list everyone I've harmed, make amends to them all in 9, keep everything clean in 10. I guess I don't have to go back through this work ever again. That didn't happen for me. I harmed plenty of people along the way and didn't make immediate amends, so I had to make new step 8 lists. But what he's talking about here is, again, this kind of developed skill of being emotionally mature and not causing harm continually, and refining ourselves through this process, and to develop better ability to live life sober. So even Bill, I think, several years later after doing this original set of work, realizes that this is a process that we can continue to live on a daily basis, year after year, staying sober. Then when I look at the willing part, this is the hard part, right? Again, I'm going to have people that I'm going to be like, yeah, I owe my wife an amends for something I've done, and I'm willing to do it just because I've got to live with her every day. I've got to make that relationship right. Well, maybe it's another type of harm that I had done someone else, who I really don't care about. So why do I need to make that amends? I'm never going to see him again. I don't want to look at that at all. Well, the reason again is, even if I'm not going to run into that person, I am carrying that weight and that character defect and that harm with me wherever I go. And my experience has been the cleaner I get with these past harms, the less likely I am to repeat them. We, he talks about on page 77, and this is an analogy I've used as well. I don't know if I picked it up from him or not, but I certainly have used this. The reopening of emotional wounds, sometimes old, some perhaps forgotten, and some still painfully festering, will at first look like a purposeless and pointless piece of surgery. And I akin it to, I've got some infections. I've got some deep wounds with some infections in there, and reopening the wounds is really important because I've got to clean that stuff out. I can keep it bandaged for a while. I might be able to, live through a little puffiness or soreness, if I'm poked in that area. But there's a good chance that infection can spread, and there's a good infection that irritability and that discomfort could cause, a real infection and a real problem in other areas of my life and other relationships in my life. So I have to become willing to see them as something like wounds that need healing and that need a little bit deeper digging. And when it comes to willingness, he simply says we pray for it until it comes, and that is the simplest part of perhaps this whole thing is there's a prayer. God help me to be willing to make these amends. God help me to be willing to write my list. And if I'm sincere about that, then I can produce the list. So it's really a mix of being willing to look at the behavior, being willing to and to be honest and humble about my behavior and stop making excuses for my behavior and wanting to get to the root causes of my discomfort with living this life without alcohol and the problems it's caused me in my relationships, wanting to have a clean slate. And it all comes through, again, it's prayer, it's practice, and it's a sincere desire to get the results of this program. I mentioned it briefly, and I'll wrap up here. Is that the good news about this is that I can always go back through the steps anytime. I can get better at it. I can have more clarity. I get a little bit more sober time. I can take another run through with a new sponsor or a new process, a workshop, whatever it might be. The one thing which I'll point out is the first set of amends is probably I want to say the easiest because I had alcohol to blame, right? I was drunk. I was using. I wanted what I wanted, and I had to get what I had to get. So I stole and I lied and cheated. The hard ones are being willing to make amends, write the list when I'm 15, 20, 25 years sober, when I know better, and I don't have the alcohol to blame anymore. And so am I willing at that point to go, yeah, I'm human and I'm an alcoholic and I've messed up and I'm willing to take another crack at this thing because I want to get better and I don't want to ruin more relationships, and being able to get humble enough to go make those amends as a sober man for sober harms caused others is really just a blessing of the program. Because I think that for myself, if I had done this once and said okay, I'm good, I don't know if I would have gotten as far as I have today. So those are my thoughts on step 8, making a list of all the people we had harmed and becoming willing to make amends to them all. Hopefully I brought you a good message on the 8th step, and looking forward to hear what you guys have to say. Thanks.